For 600 years, one empire ruled 3 continents and reshaped the world. Steel clashes. Cities burn. Ottoman banners rise. But empires don't rise by chance. They're built by giants. Sultans. Warriors. Visionaries. Some bled for power. Others rewrote the rules of the world. Today, we unveil 5 rulers who forged the Ottoman Empire's legacy and buried its enemies. This is Blood, Brilliance, and Empire. At number 1, Osman I, the seed from which the Ottoman Empire would grow. In the late 13th century, the Byzantine world was crumbling, a faded giant surrounded by vultures. And in its shadow, on the edge of Anatolia, a small frontier beylik stirred with ambition. Its leader? A Turkic warrior named Osman, son of Ertugrul. No one knew it then, but this man would ignite a storm that would echo for 6 centuries. Osman was no ordinary warlord. He was a Ghazi, a holy warrior of Islam, and he wielded both faith and force. Through a potent mix of military raids, tribal alliances, and spiritual symbolism, he began carving out territory from the decaying Byzantines. His rise wasn't just about the sword. It was about vision. According to legend, Osman had a dream. A massive tree grew from his chest, its branches stretching across the world, sheltering cities, rivers, and civilizations. His spiritual guide interpreted the dream as a divine sign. Osman was destined to found a kingdom that would span continents. That dream would become prophecy. Under Osman, the principality doubled in size. His forces, small but fierce, struck like wolves on the frontier. Every battle, every captured fortress, became a building block in the empire that would one day take Constantinople and claim the caliphate. His followers didn't call it the Ottoman Empire yet, but they would. Because Osman didn't just win wars. He planted a dynasty, forged through faith and fire, that would rule for over 600 years. And it all began with a dream, a blade, and a man no one saw coming. But from this humble spark, a flame would rise, one that would devour empires. At number 2, Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople. At just 21 years old, he shattered a 1,000-year empire and claimed a throne that emperors had died for. This was Mehmed II, the man who didn't just conquer a city, he conquered the crossroads of the world. In 1453, the world changed forever. While Europe was still reeling from the Black Death and the fall of feudal kings, a young Ottoman sultan launched an assault that would end the Byzantine Empire and shake the Christian world to its core. The siege of Constantinople was no ordinary battle. For 53 relentless days, Mehmed's forces surrounded the city's mighty walls believed to be impenetrable. But Mehmed came prepared. He unleashed massive cannons, engineered by Christian defectors, that roared like thunder and shattered stone like paper. On May 29, 1453, after a final night of prayers and war chants, Mehmed's men breached the gates. And just like that, Constantinople fell. A city that had once crowned Roman emperors now belonged to a Muslim king. But Mehmed didn't stop there. He walked into the Hagia Sophia, once the greatest church in Christendom, and declared it a mosque. He renamed Constantinople to Istanbul, restored its broken infrastructure, invited Christians, Jews, and Muslims to live there, and made it the heart of a rising empire. Then came his boldest declaration. I am Caesar now, the rightful heir of Rome. With that, Mehmed the Conqueror transformed the Ottomans from a regional power into a global empire. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a builder, a lawgiver, a visionary. And his conquest didn't just end a chapter. It started the Ottoman Golden Age. But one conquest was never enough, and one sultan would take the empire to heights never seen before. At number 3, Suleiman the Magnificent, the lawgiver and the conqueror. At the pinnacle of the Ottoman Empire stood one man, a sultan of sword and scroll, of blood and brilliance. His name echoed across Europe, Asia, and Africa as a titan among kings, Suleiman the Magnificent. He came to power in 1520, young but not naive. What the world didn't know, and would soon learn, was that under his reign, the empire wouldn't just survive, it would ascend. Suleiman's armies stormed across Europe. Belgrade fell. Rhodes, once a Christian stronghold, surrendered. The Ottoman banner flew over Hungary, and cannons thundered at the very gates of Vienna. His reach stretched not only on land but across the waves. With his legendary Admiral Barbarossa, Suleiman brought the Mediterranean under Ottoman control, making the empire a true global superpower. But power was not his only obsession. Suleiman was a lawgiver, not just a conqueror. He restructured the legal code of the empire, blending Islamic tradition with administrative efficiency. His reforms earned him the title Kanuni, the lawgiver, by his own people, and Magnificent by awestruck Europeans. And in the heart of his court, poetry flourished. Architecture soared. Mimar Sinan, the empire's greatest architect, built domes that touched the sky. Suleiman himself penned verses, haunted, tender, proud, under the pen name Muhibbi. But even emperors bleed. His most loyal friend, Pergali Ibrahim Pasha, was executed under suspicious circumstances. His own son, Mustafa, beloved by the army, was strangled on Suleiman's orders, a brutal choice driven by palace intrigue and paranoia. Yet when the dust settled and the tears dried, one truth remained. Suleiman built the height of an empire, a world of steel and silk, law and legend, power and poetry. But greatness brings rivals. And after Suleiman's brilliance, shadows began to fall. At number 4, Selim III, the reformer who faced collapse, a man caught between centuries. Selim III, born into an empire that still looked mighty on the surface, but whose foundations were quietly crumbling. By the late 18th century, the Ottoman Empire was no longer the unstoppable force it once was. Europe had changed. Armies were modernizing. Science, trade, and nationalism were shifting the balance of power. Selim saw it clearly. He wasn't just a sultan. He was a poet, a musician, and a visionary. And he knew the empire must change or perish. He introduced the Nizam-i-Seded, the new order, a radical military reform designed to replace the decaying Janissary Corps with a modern, European-style army. He built new schools, welcomed European advisors, and pushed for cultural renewal. But the old guard did not go quietly. The Janissaries, once elite, now corrupted and powerful, saw Selim's reforms as a threat to their grip. The bureaucracy resisted, the court whispered, and the streets murmured rebellion. In 1807, the very soldiers Selim tried to replace stormed his palace. The reformer sultan was deposed, imprisoned, and ultimately murdered by his own men. His blood stained the marble of Topkapi Palace, a warning echoing through time. Selim III's legacy is tragic but pivotal. He was the first to grasp the scale of the empire's decay. His failure exposed how deeply the rot had set in. But without him, later reformers would not know where to begin. He was the Ottoman Empire's final idealist, the man who saw the future but was destroyed by the past. But there was one more sultan, a final burst of energy before the end. At number 5, Abdulhamid II, the last shadow of empire. When Abdulhamid II ascended the throne in 1876, the Ottoman Empire was no longer the fearsome power it once was. The empire was bleeding, not just from within, but from all sides. European empires were circling like vultures, carving away at Ottoman territory, while internal decay and dissent festered from within. But Abdulhamid was not a passive ruler. He was a shrewd, calculating sultan, and the last one to wield true, central authority before the empire's final unraveling. One of his boldest strategies was pan-Islamism, a political and spiritual call to unite Muslims under the Ottoman Caliphate. Abdulhamid envisioned a religious revival that would empower Muslims from Morocco to Indonesia and serve as a counterweight to European imperialism. He sent envoys across Asia and Africa, used Islamic solidarity as a diplomatic weapon, and even tried to rally Muslims living under colonial rule. But Abdulhamid was also a modernizer, though on his own terms. He expanded railway networks, most notably the Hijaz Railway, which stretched toward the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. He invested in education, built thousands of schools, and supported journalism, although heavily censored and state-controlled. This was a ruler balancing the sword and the pen, tradition and progress. Yet his greatest strength, centralized power, became his vulnerability. As he tightened control, paranoia set in. He built a vast spy network. Critics were silenced. Dissenters vanished. And all the while, powerful currents were building beneath the surface. The Young Turks, an underground movement of reformists and revolutionaries who saw Abdulhamid not as a protector, but a tyrant. In 1909, the pressure exploded. A failed counter-coup led to his forced abdication. He was sent into exile, a dethroned sultan who had tried to hold back the tide of modernity with one hand and the collapse of empire with the other. Abdulhamid II remains one of the most debated figures in Ottoman history. To some, he was the last defender of Islamic unity, a visionary who saw the future and tried to protect his people from Western domination. To others, he was a paranoid autocrat clinging to absolute power in a crumbling world. But no one denies this. He was the final breath of an empire still struggling to breathe, the last sultan who tried to bend fate. From windswept Anatolian plains to the golden domes of Constantinople, the Ottomans carved a 600-year journey, a rise from tribal warriors to rulers of 3 continents. They built not just cities but systems, not just conquests, but cultures. But like all empires, theirs too faded, not with silence, but with echoes that still shape our world. Empires fall, but legacies bleed into the bones of history. If the rise and fall of this empire stirred something in you, hit subscribe. Because history isn't just what we remember, it's what we become. Only here on Forgotten Realms.